Just saying. The long weekend is just an excuse.
They're already warmed up for it.
Okay.
Especially in John Deere. The Gator River Sexy 50 speeds of
Yes, we go. Make sure you go on 3.
exciting. And the Gator
Make sure you
actually
try
is
this one.
1,400 pound bale.
Hey, quick question.
John Deere.
Was this mic 4?
Yeah, that's mic 4.
You got a better mic?
No, mic 2 is the best.
Mic 3? Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
mic 3. I mean,
Hey, thank
mic
you.
3 is the best as long as you just have to speak directly.
All right.
Are you guys helping this show?
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, Chicago, you out there?
Hello.
Hey, how we sounding? Check test. K-High 1580. Let's not pot.com.
Yes, I am. How are you, sir?
Good, good. Doing really well.
Sound check, mic 3.
Come up just a little bit more.
Mic 3 comes up.
No, you.
Oh, me? That better? We doing better now? This is K.
Sounding great. Charles, I need you to come up just a little bit more.
A little bit more. Okay. How about now?
There it is
K.
right there.
Okay, cool.
Oh, yeah.
Mic 3, 1580, K-High. Let's talk pot.com live.
Sounding good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Got limited reach here.
You're going 30.
Thank you.
30 seconds. Did this guy call me this morning? Return me $5,000. I think how much? You didn't send me $5,000.
Are we heading 10? Mike's alive.
Getting up every morning with that alarm clock blaring, Mr.
Yeah, there we go. Taking care of business.
It's Cannabis Business Attorney time live on 1580. Let's talk pot.com with the Cannabis Business Attorney, Mr. Charles T. Houghton.
And I got my partner in crime here, KC. KC, how you doing this morning?
You know, it's another good day for cannabis news. It's lots of action going on there from, legislative battles. The sessions are now coming down to an end. We're starting to see what was written and what's going to happen, and then the reactions for the next legislative session.
Yeah, and again, we're setting up some of what's happened in legislative sessions across the country. They're beginning to wind down a little bit. So for the next year, we've got what we've got, but it also provides a starting point for the new push on some pretty critical issues. The couple of things that I wanted to start out with this morning. First off, is we've got is it Representative Singer that's going to be calling in?
That's correct. We have U.S. Representative District Longmont here in Colorado calling in this at 9:20, and this is amazing. Across this nation, there's legislators that are leading these fights, and it's not an easy battle. You're going against 80 years of reefer madness and indoctrination and false information. But there's been a lot of things, and they're calling this a groundbreaking marijuana bill. And why? Because one of the bills that actually was just signed into law by the governor allows children with conditions like cerebral palsy, seizures, and epilepsy to take low-dose medical marijuana at school. And why is that groundbreaking, Mr. Howard?
Well, because up until now, it's been a pariah to allow marijuana onto school grounds, number one. And number two, it's the first time I think that people have taken an honest look at marijuana as medicine and say, listen, these kids are getting a benefit from it, number one. And number two, if they can enjoy the benefit, then they become functional to the point where they can be in school. And, we talked about it a week or two ago. It can be very, very tough for someone who has epilepsy to function. Number one, it's embarrassing for them if they have seizures. School children can be a little bit cold and cruel at times. And plus these kids, they want to be in school. They want to be normal. They want to have a chance at an education. They just want to be with their friends. And so this is a chance for those students that really want to be there and have jumped through a bunch of hoops in order to have a recommendation at a young age.
It's absolutely groundbreaking. There's drug-free school zones. This is one of those mantras of life that have just become, accepted and assured that drugs around schools are going to get you in lots of more trouble. However, because of Jack, a young child, I believe 14 years old here in Colorado, that was suffering, they have changed that. They have broken down that wall. And Mr. Houghton said it right. It's groundbreaking because now psychologically and legally, this is really being treated as medicine by law and allowed into school for a child so he can attend class just like his other fellow classmates.
Yeah, and without any stigma attached to it. And again, it's to me, it's a giant step forward because we're beginning to treat these children that have these disabilities like human beings and giving them the right to try and treat their condition and control it and make sure that they have what they need in order to succeed in life. And that, as a society, I hate to get Pollyannish again, but as a society, we owe it to our kids to give it's like we owe it to our vets. We owe it to them to give them the best shot that they have. Life's not easy. Add in a few disabilities and not being able to go to school, and it becomes impossible. So you're giving them hope.
Absolutely. It's hope for a lot of parents out there that are finding that this has worked for them or has the potential to work better than what they are currently on. We have, from children to soldiers that are on these prescription-based medicines, a lot of times they take one medicine just to counteract the other. And it becomes this toxic zombie dose that does not make you actually very happy or pleasant or cognizant. And with cannabis, we're seeing those low doses from what just happened in Pennsylvania too, Missouri, Kansas, Baton Rouge, these laws that are Georgia that are coming out with CBD oil bills. So I hope those representatives down there across this nation, from Georgia to Texas to Cali, are listening to what's happening. Treat this like medicine. There's an example being set here in Colorado, being led by Representative Singer and others, that has changed the stigma. That's not easy. That is groundbreaking.
And that stigma didn't happen overnight. Some of the other things that are happening around the country, Pennsylvania's bill came out of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. It is going to the Senate for discussion. We don't know what chances it has at the Senate. The article that I read says that the Governor Wolf, supports legalization for medical purposes. And so at least the governor is behind it. So if it hits his desk, he's going to sign it, provided it's not too watered down or whatever. And we'll wait and see what happens with that.
And when we look at Pennsylvania now, you're talking about a bill, but it's not a comprehensive, it's not a whole plan. It is
yeah. And when we talk about comprehensive, there's a lot of different interpretations of what that means. When Casey and I talk about comprehensive, what we're talking about is a complete use of the plant in all forms.
That's right.
And so that means smoking, that means vaporization, that means edibles, that means infused products, and that means
the whole plant.
Yeah, and that means any method of ingestion.
And what we're seeing across, like in Pennsylvania and other places, is kind of like the half plant solution.
Yeah, we're kind of getting there, but not all the way. For instance, in Pennsylvania, the solution does not allow edibles or concentrates and smoking. So presumably
no edibles.
No edibles.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that what they're aiming for is the use of the product by some form of a pill or something like that, which hasn't really been developed satisfactorily.
What about vaporization?
And I think vaporization. I think that's the other one. Because
that's a tragedy, because we've seen with the edibles here with all of our patients, it's such a pleasant way to take a medicine.
Well, and also too, I mean, if you think about it as medicine, it is the people that are taking it have a debilitating medical condition by definition. And already. And so they may not want to compromise their systems by smoking. They may not want to compromise their systems even by vaping. And
Correct.
sometimes, a patch or sublingual or an edible is the solution for them.
Yeah, those edibles are, it's just that I've seen that. If you haven't tried the edibles, it's such a lovely way to deliver medicine. It's like a spoonful of sugar.
Yeah, there you go. And
Mary Poppins was probably, where's Mary Poppins at?
Yeah, exactly. No wonder she could fly.
No wonder.
No wonder. She put her umbrella in the air and
she had her comprehensive whole plant solution going on.
Yeah, there we go. I knew there was a reason why that woman could fly. It was edibles. It was a spoonful of sugar.
And that Pennsylvania bill is, so it is a step forward, but it's not what a lot of activists wanted. It's a non-edibles, non-smoking, half plant solution.
Yeah, and again, we're pushing for, because we're talking about business, and the more parts of the plant and the more methods of ingestion that you can have, the more businesses that open up.
And solutions, that's right.
And that's why we keep talking about this stuff, what's going on, because you keep your eye on that. Again, you find a solution to a problem and you got a business.
That's right. In Pennsylvania, congratulations. It's not the perfect step, but that is good news. And there's other things happening across there, Mr. Houghton.
Yeah, the other thing that I saw, and I just loved it, they had a retired cop. His name is Russell, or his first name is Russell anyway. They've got a video that they're showing for commercials now. And he states in this video, first of all, he's like a 30-year veteran of law enforcement. And this is in Texas, by the way. And he says that, quote, he in all of his years as a law enforcement officer never saw anybody, quote, acting out who was under the influence of marijuana.
Acting out.
Yes.
That's a lot. So he never in his 30 years saw anyone acting out. I think it was like related to violence, correct?
Well, and he went on to say that, people who were under the influence of alcohol, a whole nother challenge. And so what they're using that for is to help push the legalization and decriminalization of marijuana in Texas.
And that's amazing. We're talking about the Lone Star State. It has one of the largest borders with the largest problem. And this could provide one of the biggest, simplest solutions.
Yeah.
Tax it, regulate it, license it.
And take it out of the hands of the Mexican cartels. Let's have people quit dying at the border.
Or the American cartels. Take it out of all those cartels and put it in the hands of, EINs and people there in Texas and in Florida and in Georgia and Tennessee and Pennsylvania. When a police veteran, a 30-year police veteran in Texas with the problems that they face tells you that, when he runs across a cannabis consumer, acting out is usually not what he's concerned about.
Yeah, he said he's never seen anybody acting out who was under the influence of marijuana. And, the people that use the product, to them, that's no surprise whatsoever.
That's right.
It doesn't exactly put you in fighting mode. And so, anyway, they're using it as a form of, I can't think of a better term, propaganda.
So they have a campaign down there with the...
Yeah, they're beginning to show it. And I'm liking what I'm seeing because they're getting people that, that are credible and that people ought to listen to. This guy's been on the front lines for 30 years and he's never seen a problem with the product.
As far as violence and human.
Yeah, people acting out.
Right.
So from a law enforcement perspective, do I want to go into a house full of people that are using marijuana to tell them to turn the music down? Or do I want to go into a house full of drunken Texans
and try to tell them to turn
the music? It's going to be a
two-step is going to be a different stop.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, hats off down there. And then the other thing I read is that Nebraska is the first reading of a bill that would allow legalization and treatment of use of the medicine, use of marijuana as medicine, has passed the Senate there. Now in Nebraska, you have to understand they have what's called a unicameral. This is your political science lesson
of the day.
Government lesson of the day. Not all states have two houses. Most houses either have a Senate and an Assembly, or a Senate and a House of Representatives. And then, of course, the U.S. Congress is comprised of the Senate and the House of Representatives.
At the federal level, yes.
At the federal level. In Nebraska, they only have a Senate. They do not have a House of Representatives, and therefore it's called a unicameral. But the way that they pass laws there is that it goes through several readings at the Senate level, and various committees have a crack at making alterations or whatever, but it's passed at least the first reading, fairly heavy majority, so that there may be medical marijuana in Nebraska at some point in time in the future. And as you probably are aware, Nebraska is
Yes, I think Oklahoma and Nebraska, are they suing us?
yeah. And so that would be, it would be tragic if they won, but it would be almost comical if they won and then all of a sudden they couldn't do what they wanted to do.
That would be,
that's the shooting yourself in the foot.
yeah, they're calling that the marijuana melee. Nebraska and Oklahoma versus Colorado, calling it Nebraska and Oklahoma the no states. I like that, the no states, Nebraska and Oklahoma, the no states.
Instead of the show me state.
So the no states are actually just
at
passed,
least one of them.
Nebraska went through their first reading of a bill that would allow for
Medical
low
use.
medical use. At the same time, their attorney general
filed suit against the state of Colorado for marijuana leaking over the border.
I like the new nomenclature, the no me states, Nebraska and Oklahoma. I'm sorry, Nebraska. I'm sorry, Oklahoma.
Well, and I've got ties to Nebraska. I went to law school at the University of Nebraska. So
yes, was there any cannabis on campus back then, Mr. Houghton?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm willing to discuss. Let's say that. Anyway. No, I did smell the aroma from time to time at the University of Nebraska, but I cannot substantiate that with visual evidence. How's that for a lawyer?
That's well done, Mr. Houghton. Well, the no states argue that Article 6 of the Constitution requires federal law prevail over contradictory state law, and no state may authorize the violation of federal law. Mr. Houghton?
Yeah, I mean, that is like saying, do as I say, not as I do.
Especially with Nebraska.
Especially with Nebraska at the moment. Now, God bless them. I hope that they get the medical part of this passed, and I hope it leads to, a broader, more whole use of the plan. I love the people of Nebraska. I spent 3 years there, and I couldn't have been treated more graciously. They've got that Midwestern welcoming mentality. And I think that they're having an important and also real dialogue about marijuana as medicine, and I love to see it. Now, you mentioned the lawsuit with Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Colorado, and we touched briefly on the fact that the feds may weigh in.
They are asking from the POTUS to submit a reply.
Yeah, the Supreme Court, in kind of an unusual manner, it happens, but it's kind of rare. They've asked for a brief from the Solicitor General from the United States government. Now, again, we spoke about a long time ago, we spoke about the judge in California that was faced with, is this a states' right issue, and can I basically overturn the Controlled Substances Act from the bench as opposed to a legislative act? Well, do not be surprised if the response from the Solicitor General is a legal response, which is, I can tell you, is not going to be satisfactory because the law is what the law is.
Is what it is.
And you can't, magically wave your wand and say, okay, the Controlled Substances Act doesn't apply.
Well, I had a conversation with some colleagues the other day, some fellow intellectuals in the industry, and they kind of were blaming the black robes and expecting them to create policy.
Yeah,
and we have to understand they really just define words when it comes down to it. What does the word separate and equal mean? What does the word private, public mean? Their decisions kind of help craft the law, but that's really not what their job is to define what is.
Yeah, I mean it is that's why we have the three branches of government. They're supposed to outweigh each other. If the legislature passes a law that is unconstitutional and someone raises that as an issue, well, then it's up to the Supreme Court to step in and say, you know what, guys, you can't pass a law that says that. And so, but they are stuck with what's in front of them.
And what they have in front of them is not pretty. It's called the Controlled Substance Act.
Yeah, and so what I would expect from the Solicitor General to weigh in is one of two things. One, he could surprise me to death, and I would love to be surprised to death. And he could come back with a ruling that says that states' rights really are what they say, states' rights. And the individual states have the right to do this, even though there's a federal law that specifically prohibits it. I don't look for that to happen, but
That
it's
would be,
possible.
yes, that's one of the possibilities.
I think what you're really going to get is a response that says the Controlled Substances Act says this, and the federal government, as the enforcement arm of the Controlled Substances Act, in a fashion, they're the enforcing body, you know, through the DEA and the Department of Justice. He could say that yes, that they've got that, but they've been told to stand down on this particular issue by the administration. Now the question is, can the administration do that?
Yeah, it's actually that the Supreme Court of the United States asked the Justice Department last week to explain its quote unquote position regarding litigation. And the DOJ's response is not expected for months, but this is a very interesting story.
And I really, you know, as an attorney, I am very interested in reading what comes out of the Solicitor General's office. I really am, because I think it's going to be a lesson in government.
All those years in school, and this is going to be probably the paper of his life, responding to the Supreme Court.
Well, and he's going to have a lot of people helping him. You know, they're going to have some of the best and brightest scholars that help him with this.
You know, I'm going to call it the no states versus the COBO states, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon.
Yeah, there we go.
The no states versus the COBO. Let's see what happens at the SCOTUS with that, Mr. Houghton.
Yeah, anyway, that's going to be an interesting piece of work, depending on how.
Well, it's exciting. If you like listen to this show and you want to know the laws, this is the Cannabis Business Attorney Hour, and we chew it up every day, Monday through Friday on 1580 K-High.
And letstalkpot.com. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we should have Representative Jonathan Singer, a state representative from the state of Colorado, the author of the bills we're going to be talking about. It's 1580 K-High and Let's Talk Pot. See you on the other side. That is.
And we're clear.
Thank you. Let's see. It is my name.
You're welcome.
You've reached Jonathan Singer. I'm not here right now, but feel free to leave a message, and I'll get back with you as soon as possible. Thanks. Please have a great day.
Representative Singer, this is Charles Houghton, and Representative Singer, this is Charles Houghton and K.C.Stark. We're trying to get you on the radio, so Casey will probably be giving you a call here in a minute.
Let's try one more time, Mr. Houghton.
Wait for the line to clear. Line won't clear.
Hang up. There we go.
Back in 60.
Jonathan Singer, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, you are there. That's wonderful. I didn't even notice that. Sorry about that. We're going to go on in about 30 seconds. You'll hear the music. Then Mr. Houghton and I will introduce you, if that's okay. Are you there, Mr. Singer? Mr. Singer? Mr. Singer? Mr. Singer? Mr. Singer?
Back in 30.
Jonathan, can you hear me? There's it, Mr. Singer, can you hear me?
Hello?
Jonathan, can you hear me?
You talk. I'll try and get it. Okay, what's the number?
Back in 10.
MPP or on the web at mpp.org.
Dave Ramsey may give you financial advice. We tell you where to buy your weed. K-High 1580, the Weed Talk Station.
This is Jonathan.
Good morning. This is 1580 K-High Radio and letstalkpot.com. If I am not mistaken, we should have Representative Jonathan Singer from the state of Colorado on the phone. Mr. Singer, or Representative Singer, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. First of all, I want to thank you very much for appearing on the show. What we're doing this morning is as we always do, we kind of do a legislative update to begin the program. And one of the things that we've seen is your name popping up in some of the best places from our standpoint. And the two things that or at least the two parts of the bill that we want to talk about is Jack's amendment and the caregiver bill.
Excellent.
And so for everybody that's listening, can you please introduce yourself and tell the story of why you became involved in medical marijuana, what it means to you, and then tell us a little bit about the legislation that you pushed through.
Absolutely. So I represent about 75,000 people here in the state of Colorado, up in northern Boulder County, basically Niwot, Longmont, Lyons, and Allens Parks.
Hello?
Representative Singer, did we lose you there?
I think we might have lost the representative.
Oh, did you lose me again?
Yeah,
No,
no.
I have you. Yes, there. You're back online there. Thank you, sir.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I wasn't giving you the silent treatment. So anyway, I apologize for that. So anyway, yeah, I represent about 75,000 people in northern Boulder County, everywhere from Longmont to Longs Peak. And basically, you know, I got involved with marijuana policy early on. I was one of only 2 state lawmakers to actually publicly endorse Amendment 64 to regulate marijuana similar to alcohol. And after that, I decided to stay involved. And basically, after Amendment 64 became part of our Constitution, a lot of people looked to me and said, well, since apparently you were one of the only people at the Capitol that thought this was a good idea, show us how it works. And the truth is, none of us really knew how it worked. And since then, I've just started branching out into other types of policy, including medical marijuana policy.
Well, we've seen your name out there in a lot of different places, from the questions about social clubs that we have down here in Colorado Springs, of like Studio A64, my personal social club. We've seen your name on Jack's Amendment. We've seen your name out there on the caregiver bill. And it does take the people and the representatives to make this happen. What is your thoughts on Jack's Amendment and the caregiver bill for those who are listening that might not be aware of what that means now? Because that's new law, correct?
Well, it's not quite law yet. The governor has not signed it, so we're still waiting for that. He's got about 25, 26 days to sign that. But I have no doubt he will. But basically, you know, there were 2 things in this bill. The first one is to make sure that we had, you know, appropriate regulation of caregivers in our medical marijuana system. And you know, we have a very robust regulation system for our dispensaries. It's a little different for everyone else. And so a current physician and current State Senator Irene Aguilar introduced a bill with me to actually put a little bit more regulation in the system to give people a little bit more confidence in our caregivers. And at the same time, I heard the story about Jack Split, a kid who, you know, is quadriplegic, has terrible muscle spasms, and has gotten significant relief from his medical condition from medical marijuana. And unfortunately, he made the news because he was kicked out of school for having a private nurse dispense his medicine to him. So
and that's very disruptive for a family. I mean,
I decided to introduce Jackson then into the caregiver bill to make sure that, you know, kids don't have to choose between their medicine and going to school.
Yeah, and that's a profound statement. I mean, that sums it up in one. We were talking before the break about, you know, we have to show compassion for our children. You know, being a kid is hard enough. Being a kid that's got severe disabilities and is separated from normal society because of it. These kids want to be in school. They're not going there. I mean, and they're not using the medicine to get high. They're using the medicine so that they can function and stay in school. So that statement, you know, the having to choose between going to school and having your medicine, that's dead on. And I can't tell you how much, you know, again, I always say it, you know, I'm humbled and I'm proud that we've got people in the state of Colorado like you, legislators, who are willing to stand up and take what was probably a fairly unpopular opinion and say, listen, we need to look at this from a compassionate standpoint.
Well, and you know what I'll say is it wasn't so much unpopular as it was probably unpopular for someone to tackle, but it wasn't as unpopular when you look at the vote. It's really actually, you know, I give people like Stacy, Jack's mom, so much credit for all the time she takes, not only taking care of him and working with the schools to make sure that he can go to school, but then coming down to the state capitol and pleading her case with me even before she knew who I was, and even before I was introducing this amendment. But the amendment, Jack's amendment, passed unanimously in the Agriculture Committee, both Democrats and Republicans. I had one very conservative Republican come up to me afterwards and said, you know, Jonathan, Representative Singer, if you told me at 8 o'clock this morning I'd be voting for your amendment, I might have had to ask what you were smoking.
That's beautiful.
And it really, you know, I give a lot of credit to the patients and the kids that came out that explained their situation. And the same thing happened in the Senate when the Senate had to vote on my amendment. It was, I believe it was a unanimous vote once again. So everyone basically is, at least in Colorado, we're starting to understand that there's a difference between, you know, recreational marijuana and medical marijuana, and the fact that we need to respect doctors and patients and what doctors choose to do.
You know, this is an amazing moment. So our listeners, you know, we get comments from Alaska to Florida, and, you know, this could be used as an example. Have you had any conversations with other representatives from other states contacting you in reference to how this could work for them?
You know, it's funny. You know what? It's one of these things that I just started off doing because I thought it was the right thing. I didn't realize I was the first in the nation to try and crack this nut.
Well, it's called the drug-free school zone. It's a pretty tough nut to crack.
Well, apparently, but so was you know, so was decriminalizing and regulating marijuana. But we seem to have done that pretty well over the last few years. So the state of Oregon, there's some lawmakers that have reached out to me there. They have a law that allows nurses, certain nurses, to actually recommend or not recommend, but administer medical marijuana to hospice patients. So if you're literally on your last breath, in the state of Oregon, it is legal for nurses to administer medical marijuana to hospice patients in a hospice.
And this is really groundbreaking. When we say that word, we don't use that just for the fun of it. Everyone listening across this nation, the change, the tide, the movement, it takes the people on the ground like Stacy and her child, Jack, and the representatives near you, whether it's your town, city, or county, and reach out, develop a dialogue, and you can perhaps have a Jack's Amendment where you are at. There's a lot of listeners out there, Representative Singer, that are caregivers, and not all of us have time to read the law. So there's caregivers that contacted me yesterday. We did a brief story on it. That caregiver bill, it sets new limits new requirements. Could you go over those real quick, like a 101s for all those caregivers that are listening to us this morning?
Absolutely. This is a double-edged sword. Not every caregiver is going to be happy with me on this one.
Yes, we've heard that. Yes, we have that. True.
Yeah, your ears may have been burning a little.
Yeah, that's probably an understatement. Actually, the first thing that I'm going to say is, I have never dealt with so many emotionally angry people on both sides as I have with the caregiver bill. Not Jack's amendment, but the remainder of it. And I just want everyone to be aware that lawmaking is a process, and laws can get amended and changed every year. And I really hope that both sides, and I really do mean that, the people that wanted more regulation for caregivers and the people that wanted no regulation for caregivers, understand that taking an approach that starts with anger is probably not going to lead itself to the outcome that you want.
Well, and I think that's a point that's well taken, because we are pushing the agenda on this, that if something isn't right, something isn't working the way you want to, get out there and say something. But I think the point that you make about coming in angry and militant and things like that, all that does is polarize people, number one, and immediately they become defensive, because they feel like they're being personally attacked. So when Representative Singer is telling you, come in and make a good argument, I think you should listen to him, because he's been there, he's done that. Anyway,
he's in the hot seat, so to speak. Yeah, you are in the hot seat, Representative Singer. This is not whenever you take a caregiver stance, you're guaranteed to upset 50% of the people.
Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't mind that, from my perspective, I sort of understand that I'm going to take the heat, but, I will tell you, I had some people in the lobby approach me that really wanted stronger regulations and were very upset with me that I didn't take a stronger stance. And they really didn't get everything they wanted. And by the same token, I have people who came to testify who were dead set against the bill and started turning this into personal attacks against me. And if anyone was at all sympathetic to their cause, they soon lost that sympathy. And
let me explain this for those listeners out there. This is the caregiver here in Colorado is where everything began. We all began as caregivers. There were no centers. There were no dispensaries. There was no retail marijuana. I myself was a caregiver, and so were all the other owners. The bill changed and created businesses, 1284, et cetera, where you can have a license to sell it. So it's kind of divided the market in between the caregiver versus that potential center where one of them could be blamed as the new black market. But I think the bill is a balanced first step. There's new limits, there's new requirements. What are those new limits and requirements?
Absolutely. So the bill makes a few changes, but probably the biggest one that got the most attention is there's now a hard cap of 99 plants that any individual caregiver can grow. And that's probably the thing that's carried the most controversy, the most rancor, is the idea that the state would be able to tell any caregiver what they can and cannot do. The reason we came up with that 99 plant count cap was a couple things. First of all, once you go over 99 plants and you start going into 100 plants, you start looking at different federal prosecutions for marijuana drug crimes. And so if you don't want the federal government, which most of us don't at this point, want them interfering with our marijuana system here in Colorado, we decided that was the main reason for that 99 plant count cap. The other thing is, there was a pretty high-profile case not too long ago about a person abusing the caregiver system to illegally distribute marijuana in other states. I mean, it was a pretty complicated system where they were using a skydiving company to
actually a skydivers, right?
And yeah. Well, I don't know if the skydivers were actually jumping out of the planes or whether they were just flying them into other airports. But either way, I'm sure there will be a movie about it. But at the end of the day, this was a pretty big drug bust, and the criminals specifically chose Colorado because of our caregiver system. And in order to avoid that level of scrutiny, we decided to put our own level of scrutiny into it. The other benefit that this gives people, and we've had law enforcement come testify to this fact as well, is that when they knock on a caregiver's door and they've got 30 or 40 or 50 or 99 plants, they're not always sure whether this person's a caregiver or somebody else. So what we're going to have is a registry of caregivers that won't be immediately accessible to law enforcement unless they have probable cause to basically ping it. And so if somebody, comes up to a house that, maybe they got a complaint and maybe it smells like marijuana when you've got 50 plants in there.
That happens.
It does. That officer, instead of knocking on the door and either walking away but treating that home with suspicion, or B, repossessing those plants and hurting a bunch of patients because those plants have now been confiscated as evidence when they were legal in the first place, they will be able to call the Department of Health and get access to this registry to see, oh yes, they're allowed to have 43 plants. And, I can count them out right now. There's only 42 of them. Or they're allowed to have 43 plants, but by gum, they have 98 or 200.
Representative Singer, I assure you there's caregivers listening out there right now. We're just getting ready to go to break. Would you care to stay with us after the break?
I'm more than happy to stay with you on the break.
Okay, because there's a lot of caregivers listening right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
thank you.
Some of the things that Representative Singer has put forth are things that I've seen. Law enforcement, they've got a job to do too. And when Casey and I were both sitting on the City of Colorado Springs Medical Marijuana Task Force, one of the things we saw was the law enforcement perspective. And we're going to talk about that a little bit when we come back from break. Right now, you're listening to the Cannabusiness Attorney. I can be reached at charles@thecannabusinessattorney.com. And Casey can be reached at howtomarijuana.com. This is 1580 K High Radio and let's talk pot.com. See you on the other side.
Wing.
And we're clear.
Mr. Representative Singer, can you still hear us?
Oh, yeah.
That was a very good insight into those laws, and that caregiver bill is always a tough one. Every time we try to do any limits on that, I kind of am split because I love my caregivers and I love my center owners, so I'm stuck between both of them. So it's hard to take a stance.
And I'm the same way. I've got a number of centers that they believe that caregivers are the pariah because they're taking business away from them, and they spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars being compliant, and caregivers don't have to do it. So
right,
I think it's a problem that needed to be addressed before it boiled over into something really ugly. And I really applaud you for taking that up. And the regulations, like you say, and I'm going to make the joke later on, is that it's really, really easy, or it's not so easy to please everybody all the time, but you can certainly upset everyone really quick.
Oh, I knew exactly what was coming when I put my name on that. To be honest with you, it was a little more out of frustration than anything else with this process, where it seems like people tried to address the issue and then it would go away.
Yeah. And also too, I'm sure that some of the proposals were either very pro caregiver or very anti caregiver, depending on which group you were talking to. And so, striking that balance was.
I have a personal question, Representative Singer. I don't know if you're aware of it, but I opened the Studio A64 here 3 years ago and was given 2 cease and desist orders from our mayor and our chief of police. And we were able to beat them in court twice at public hearing and established what I believe to be the first licensed government-sanctioned brick-and-mortar cannabis club in the nation. And we saw your name up there on commenting on the cannabis response on We Will See cannabis clubs similar to ours. And I would like to invite you down to my cannabis club sometime.
I would love to, actually. Yeah. It's honestly, I think that's one of the things I'll be working on this summer, is creating a sort of a state framework to allow cities to opt into this model.
Could I work with you on that, Representative Singer? I went to court twice. My attorney and I won that 7-2.
Oh, I'd love to help too.
If I could have that, that'd be great.
I will always take more cooks in the kitchen, let me tell you. So.
If you see our Cannabis Club, it's quite unique. It really is a true social club. We microfinance artists and singers and politicians and raise money for them. It really is a beautiful thing. It's we don't sling weed.
Yeah, no, you definitely piqued my curiosity.
Have you seen the Studio A64 story?
Gallon of fuel. Tomorrow is full of promise. Let's keep it that way. CSX, how tomorrow moves. K-High 1580, pimpin' with the Weed Pimps. High Drive at 5. Tune in for the Weed Pimps, 5 to 7.
Mike's alive.
Good morning. We are 1580 K-High Radio, and let's talk pot.com. I am Charles, the Cannabusiness Attorney. I have my partner in crime here, KC, and Representative Singer has been gracious enough to sit through the break and agreed to continue talking with us because he brings a lot to the table, not only from the front lines. We always joke on this radio station, at least on this show, that making laws is a little bit like making sausage. It's not something that you really want to watch, and you've seen it up close and personal how these things work and the balance that you have to reach. And for those people that don't understand the caregiver model, like Casey was saying, when we first started in this whole thing, everybody was a caregiver. Then when the medical marijuana code was passed back in 2010, the caregivers were relegated to kind of a shadowy side existence is the only way I can describe it.
Not registered.
They weren't registered. They were limited to 5 patients. If you were a caregiver, you couldn't name a caregiver yourself. 2 or more caregivers cannot grow in the same location. And with those restrictions on them, they still continue to, I guess, in a way, they served a purpose because there were a number of patients that needed medicine that was either specially grown or blended for that particular patient, and caregivers were the only ones that could do it. So do they serve a purpose in the entire system?
Yes.
Absolutely. But some of them, like you said, they were using it as a ruse to hide an illegal activity, which does take money away from legitimate centers and dispensaries. And also it gives Colorado a black eye on a national and worldwide scale because it provides them kind of this place to hide. And so with this piece of legislation, it seems to me like we're kind of bringing them out, and the legitimate ones will still be able to operate. And the ones that weren't legitimate, they may have a little bit more difficult time. Did that kind of conversation come in?
Oh, absolutely. Basically, the reason that I put my name on this bill was really 2 things. We had a committee that actually convened before January, before our legislative session started. And we were looking at all issues marijuana, or a lot of issues marijuana. This is one of the things that came up. And basically, I've seen how these conversations have gone in the last couple of years. Usually, the State Department of Public Health tries to put out new rules. A bunch of really well-meaning, angry constituents come out and basically shout down any changes, some for very good reasons, and then ultimately nothing changes. And I felt like we were at a tipping point or a breaking point where we needed to start addressing this in a reasonable way. And so I put my name on this bill with State Senator Irene Aguilar, who's a physician, to say to patients, caregivers, law enforcement, public health officials, everybody, look, if we're going to do this kind of change, I want everyone to see it coming from a mile away. And I don't want any surprises out there. I want everyone to know exactly what we're talking about. There's no backroom deals, no backdoor changes. It's all going to be in the light of day.
When I read that bill, Representative Singer, I see as, if I take the middle ground here, and I'm a caregiver, it would allow me to get up to 99 plants still. I think I have to be able to still verify that by documentation, or do I have to apply with the state for an exemption to, 5 patients, 6 plants?
Correct. So, and basically, and we define the different types of caregivers that are out there as well. But one of the things that we did, if you're not growing for yourself, if you're growing for one or two or more patients, and you're a caregiver, we're basically saying if you're growing more than 36 plants, you need to register with the Department of Public Health. If you're growing less than 36 plants, we really recommend that you register, and that you're doing so in a way that doesn't exceed that 99 plant count limit. And if you're growing over 36 plants, you need to have some medical documentation showing why you're doing that.
Let me make sure I understand that. You're saying if I have less than 36 as a caregiver under the new caregiver bill, there's a recommendation you register. If you have over 36, there's a need to register.
That's correct, and I'm happy to correct myself on the record if I'm wrong on that one. It's been about a week since the session is over, and so I know there's a certain amount of legislative amnesia that kicks in. So I will
legislative amnesia. I like that.
Write that one down. Representative Singer, also too, regarding these plans, is there an ounce count or a limit on the size of the plants that people could grow? Let's say, for instance, I've got red cards, patient identification cards, that allow me to grow 72 plants, and I register my grow with the Department of Health and presumably probably with the Department of Revenue too. I'm all registered. I got everything like that. Now, is there a limit on the amount of product that I can have, or am I limited to what the patients are allowed to have?
So let me see if I'm answering this correctly, and then correct me if I'm wrong. So if you yourself are a caregiver, but then you are then growing, let's say, 6 of your own plants for your own use, is the question then, would you be limited in what you could grow for yourself based on what you're allowed to grow for your patients? Is that?
No, I guess what I was aiming at is that, it is well known in Colorado that some patients obtain, we call them red cards because they used to be big and they had red borders. But anyway, it's a patient identification registration card is what it is. It's issued by the Colorado Department of Health and Environmental Services, CDPHE. At any rate, on those, there's frequently an additional plant count. So I get to possess 36 plants or something like that. Is there a limit on the number of ounces that I can put in, or is it still tied to what the patients can have? So if a patient has a 36 plant count, but doesn't say anything about ounces, it's still 2 ounces of the usable form of the product.
Right. If the patient is limited to those 2 ounces, then that's exactly, what the patient is able to carry off with them. That is one thing that we actually took into consideration, and it was just, I think, a little more complicated than what we had time for, is, some plants, as you know, are, no bigger than, a tiny, house plant, and others look almost like palm trees.
Yeah.
And that's probably a more honest and accurate way of dealing with it than just putting a 99 hard plant count limit.
Yeah, because I actually testified before the Senate in 2010 for House Bill 1284, and one of the senators, a very nice lady, didn't know anything about the industry, asked me during the testimony, well, how much does a plant produce?
Right.
And I was, a little bit dumbfounded. Somebody from the peanut gallery yelled out 2 ounces, and everybody laughed.
And that became the standard.
But what was funny, I mean, it was already built into the Constitution, so it was already the standard. But I had to explain to her that a plant doesn't get the memo on how much it's supposed to produce. It depends on the strain, depends on how big it is. It's a little bit like asking, well, how big is a house? Well, how big do you want to build it?
Right.
And so
no, it's actually a great metaphor. And one of the things I spent a lot of time explaining is the difference between a plant with high THC count versus CBD, and how the plant yields look very different on a CBD plant as opposed to a THC. So it was still too complicated to come up with a good equivalency, but it's something that I can't imagine that we won't be revisiting this over and over again.
Yeah, I'd like to step in there, Representative Singer, for all those listeners out there that are tuning in and listening. We've been talking with U.S. Representative Jonathan Singer here in Colorado, explaining several very groundbreaking new amendments and bills that are possibly coming law. Jack's Amendment, which allows for cannabis use on school grounds, groundbreaking. The Caregiver Bill, which is setting new limits and requirements for registration and of caregiver grows. And if you do have questions about that, you can certainly contact us at howtomarijuana.com. I had one more issue I'd like to touch base with that's very personal and dear to me. 3 years ago, I opened up Studio A64, a brick and mortar cannabis club, and had to face 2 cease and desist orders and threats of, stop or go to jail. And that's a tough decision as a business owner, but we believed in the need for a social club where Americans are treated equally, not separately. And we historically won that case, setting up what has become the new standard for cannabis clubs here in Colorado with StudioA64.com. I noticed you mentioned recently, back in April, that you will see clubs similar to bars. Tell us how you think about the social clubs.
Honestly, I thought that was just, well, first of all, I think it's great that you're setting the gold standard here. But when I made that statement, I thought it was just more of a statement of fact about, the question from the Denver Post was, well, what does the future of marijuana in Colorado look like? And I said, well, we have bars for alcohol. Eventually, people are going to want to safely consume this somewhere other than their home. I think we're going to have bars for marijuana and something, I was aware of cannabis clubs. I know that, I've had a few people actually approach me since Amendment 64 passed to say, can we put something in law to put some guardrails around this? Because otherwise it might turn into something that we don't want it to.
Exactly.
And we just haven't had the time to, or I haven't had the time to do it. And this is a year where it won't be an election year for me. And so I'll have a little more time to actually do the policy instead of the politics. And this is one of the things I'd like to roll up my sleeves on.
Well, Representative Singer, Mr. Houghton and I have both rolled up our sleeves and faced planning and zoning and the city council with our very unique business model, because we don't want to be weed slingers. We're not trying to take profits or potential away from those other caregivers. But it has been, I wish we had another hour to talk with you. If we'd like to reach out and work with you on that social.
Absolutely. I mean, because the thing that we've seen, sitting on the task force and things like that is we're very familiar with zoning and planning and how that whole game is played. And I think that we've got some valuable insights into what make those. We've got to cut away. Representative Singer, thank you very much.
Exciting day.
Time. We will have you on again. This is Radio 1580 K-High Radio and letstalkpot.com. You guys have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Taking care of business. Thank you, Representative Singer.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chicago.
And we're clear. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chicago.
Hey, thank you very much.
Rachel, great show. Stayed on for the whole 4 minutes.
Oh, no problem. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
No, I really sure think we could give him some valuable insight on how that. Air conditioner. Our mics are off. That was really excellent. This whole weekend was called. I'm trying to get Shauna Band's people on. I'm also trying to get Tennessee on, and also in Oklahoma. There's Oklahoma, some exciting stuff. They're suing us. We have a guy on this pushing for the bills. We have Kentucky hemp farmers and that Shauna Band. I was hoping to get on today because that allowing on school grounds wasn't exactly what Shauna Banda had happened to her, but it was kind of similar where her kid talked about it. They just, because the kid talked about it, they made their home. Yeah. That was not cool.
Yeah, I've got to go to or to Adams County for a client that's they got one of the licenses for a cultivation facility in Adams County. The Brownie.
Brownies, James
Yeah.
Brownie.
James
How's he
Brownie.
doing?
Good, good. They're going for their conceptual reading of the plant. And they are doing.
Found their property and everything now?
Yeah, they found a property. I've been helping them with the leases.
That was not easy. What they find?
It's like a 4,000 square foot warehouse with a strip club next door.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the name of the company is like, Dewey Cheatham Town.com. So
Excellent. So you're going up to Adams County with James today?
Yeah.
Bravo.
Well, they put it in the name of Barbara and her friend Leslie. Leslie, Barbara's his wife.
That is so nice to see one of our clients. I already came to the January show because they won the lottery.
Yeah.
David and his wife.
Yeah.
They were great people.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going up there to do that. And then I got to deal with this idiot. Guy sent me an email this morning. He said we need a firm of bigger size and scope. He said $5,000. I'm like, you never gave me $5,000. I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, well, they made it come from this company called Green Fence. And I said, I didn't get any money from Green Fence either. I didn't get any money from you. So give me the canceled check, and we I was supposed to have gotten it out the top. But other than that, I don't know what you're talking about.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Could be a fishing thing.
No. I know the guy. I know who he is. He's from Massachusetts. Somebody I met back in Canada.
There was so much have a random on this day.
Yeah.
So it's a long day.
See ya.
Have a good one.
receipt you're asking right now, just tell them I refuse the rest of it. Okay? Not to the level where you say you're gonna schedule time to meet with the client to find out, you know, who's out there. Yeah. B. No. DJ. They heard this. behave. I really do hate it when they do that.